Welcome to Kentucky,
the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
that when the hour grows late, the Bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes on in the Bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the midnight hour once again, and in this, the spooky season, we call that the witching hour for Midnight Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
And happy Halloween to all you out there, or happy Samhain, or happy harvest, whatever you choose to celebrate. In this very special episode, we're going to break down some very true, very scary stories from right here in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and a lot of these stories are going to be from this area that Ben and I live in, the Lake Cumberland area, Russell County particularly.
These stories deal with many things that we have talked about on the show before, from the cryptids of Kentucky, to the UFOs flying over Kentucky, to the entities and spectral ghosts of Kentucky. All of the names of witnesses have been changed, and all of the names mentioned within the stories have been censored for the sake of privacy and anonymity. This first story that we're going to play for you guys involves very much the unidentified flying objects that were seen over central Kentucky this past summer, and goes a little bit into the glowing orange-red fireballs that have been seen over Kentucky pretty much since time immemorial. This is Jacob's story.
I was with my uncle, and we were chilling outside, and there was this, well, I don't remember exactly who noticed it, but I remember looking at it, and we looked at it for a minute, and it was this, like, white light with a red bottom over the field. I remember it, like, curving, like, out of the woods and coming back to where it was. The curving was, like, kind of swifter than all the other movements it made. Just kind of sticks out in my head. And it went down, like, kind of came down into the tree line a little bit. I'm not sure if it was in the woods or just in front of the tree line, but it, like, kind of slowly drifted downwards into the left, like, as slanted. Then, like, it's almost like it, like, landed for a minute or something. And, then it, like, turned off for a minute. And then I saw it again, closer to us in the field, like, because it was flying. It wasn't flying, it was, like, on the ground, but still moving. The second experience, it was the summer of 2017. I think it was in June. And, we decided to go swimming for a little bit. It was kind of near dark, and that was, like, the only time I enjoyed going swimming, because it wasn't so hot. But, we were just swimming, and, my pool is kind of surrounded by a forest, along with the rest of my house. And, all of a sudden, sort of slowly, I noticed a paper-like blimp thing. It was kind of day, so you could kind of see, like, the wrinkles and things. And he asked me what that was. I said maybe it's like a weather balloon or something. I noticed it when it was in the corner of, like, a tree, and where we were angled, it looked like it was kind of slowly emerging kind of thing. It was moving forward, but I'm not sure. It was probably, I don't know, 1,500 feet off the ground. And, anyway, it just slowly moved at an angle over the pool. And it kind of freaked me out, but it really freaked my friend out because I don't know, but he just got out of the pool really fast and said that he wanted to go inside. And I said, dude, we're fine. It's just probably a weather balloon or something. And just while I was saying that to him, I like turned around and made it like a lot further. Like it would have had to have been going faster to make it there. It was actually it was 2017 June 1 maybe in the AM. I was up late after my father's birthday. There was like a big occasion. And usually whenever we have like a family gathering or something with food, my mom fills the coolers and puts all the drinks out on the porch. And I was like eating some pizza, just like playing some video games. And I got thirsty, so I went upstairs for a drink. And I remembered that all the drinks were in the cooler outside. So I went outside to grab a drink. I opened the cooler and I set my drink on top of the cooler while I went to go close the door so my dog didn't get out. And whenever I came back to grab the drink, I noticed the paper light blimp figure over my pool. It was just floating there, probably at the max 100 feet away from the pool, like to the pool, from where it was to the pool water. And it looked almost like a Chinese lantern, but sideways, but not moving up or down or in any direction. And it was like a blimp-like structure with like some sort of metal bracing on the sides, because whenever you stick something through paper, you can usually see it. And it looked like some sort of bracing on the inside. It was not too big, maybe the size of like a chair. After I stood there and watched it, it like almost began to like circle a little bit, like turn to the side. And I could see like the inside of it, and like the back was kind of open, and I could see that there was nothing in it except for like metal bracing or something of the sort. It didn't have any real reason to be floating there because there was no sound. It freaked me out. So after I believe I left my drink sitting there, and I went in to wake my dad up to show him. Or I believe he was already awake. I somehow had awakened him or something. And I said, Dad, come look at this. And whenever I went to go show him in my window, I got to the window faster than him. And I saw it before he did. And like I turned around to motion him to come get him because it was freaking me out. And when he got there, it was gone. Completely gone. I saw not a speck of it anywhere. Give me a second. Actually, I was with my friend again, I believe. And we were going to the movies. And I was driving on like a parkway. And obviously there was a tree line to our right, and it was almost dark. And I saw the same like paper like blimp. I couldn't really even tell if it was coming towards us or if it was moving backwards, but it was too far away to really tell what the texture was. Like, I could see it so close the first time, but I could still see that it was still same, like, shape and everything. There was some bigger trees coming up just right in front of us. I only saw it for 20 seconds at the most, and it looked like it was, like, it's the face of the flying object was towards the car. Like, the way we were driving, I could see the front of it, or what at least I thought to be the front of it. And, as we were approaching it, I saw for a few seconds the side of it, and it looked to be the same shape. And, whenever we got to what I thought to be the nose of the, UFO, I couldn't tell if it was moving forward or backwards, or just, hovering, I suppose. So, me and my, friend were camping. In my field, we had brought a camper out there, decided to stay for a week or so, and we were overlooking the ridgeline one night. There's a dip in my field, and we went down there to look at just be down there and enjoy the moment. And we were doing that, and I noticed that there's a dip, and then it's the tree line into the forest, and probably for about 2 or 3 miles back into the forest, you don't reach anything until you reach the parkway, which is 2 to 3 miles back. And anyway, I was kind of looking up at the tree line because I heard like a noise, like maybe a pine cone or something falling, and I noticed that this like thing, like a drone, was coming right over my head because I was directly in front of the tree line. And it had like 3, it almost looked like it had to be some sort of drone shape or like a jet, because it had like 3 like triangular like red lights like in a triangular pattern, and I couldn't really see the outline much of the object. And I had like one big, like, whitish light in the middle. And then whenever it was directly over my head, it shined a light down. And me and my friend were scared that, like, maybe, like, cops or something, the 911 had been dialed. And the light shined halfway down, probably. Like, I couldn't see it on the ground, so it wasn't a spotlight or something, but it was, like, halfway down. And that weirded me out so much because the light was under us, so I backed up a little bit, and it started backing up into the tree line. Like, it was above the tree line, and it started backing up back to the way it came, and I, like, ran up the dip to get a better look at it, and it just backed up, like, at a pretty moderate speed, like, smoothly. And whenever I saw it backing up so quickly, it weirded me out, so I decided it's a dip, and then it's like a smooth, flattish field. So I ran up the dip and kind of ran a little bit. Well, I was already up the dip, and I was looking at it, then I decided to move flat a little bit to see if I could get a better plane of view at it. And it just backed up until I couldn't see it anymore very quickly, but it was so smooth it almost looked like it wasn't moving at all.
We want to deeply thank Jacob for sharing his story with us. So what do you make of it, man? That one ties in very well with what we talked about on the last episode.
Yeah. This location of this is, from my understanding, is fairly close to where 2 of the sightings we discussed in the previous episode is located.
3, actually. We hit on Daniel Wilson's. We hit on my neighbor.
Yeah.
And then we hit James Bunch's.
Yeah, exactly.
And all 3 of those are located very close proximity to where this, or what we believe to be, located very close proximity to this setting, or these sightings.
Right. And this is where, and if we look at the timelines, these span over several years, if not a decade, of people sighting these.
Very much so.
In the same location. And if we want to go back to what James Bunch talked about when he went to meet with the gentleman,
for sure,
that he believed was abducted, and the gentleman stated it's not the first time and it won't be the last, and possibility all these reports are this craft coming back to this person.
That is a very good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Or they're being summoned somehow, or they're just continuing to return to this area for some reason.
And not only that, but he mentions the parkway throughout this. And I mean, last week on the UFOs over Central Kentucky episode, it seemed like these things almost followed the Cumberland Parkway. It seemed like you could trace the Cumberland Parkway back to all of these lots.
Yeah. And
not only that, but this specific area of the Cumberland Parkway.
Yeah. And if you look on a map, the Cumberland Parkway, especially where this section runs through, it's definitely running through some of the most remote parts of Russell County.
For sure.
And it goes into Pulaski County, which, is also some of the most remote parts of Pulaski County. Pulaski County is a big county, but this section is not very populated. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of wooded areas. It's not the Daniel Boone Forest by no stretch of the means, but it's still a very heavily wooded areas. A lot of, hollers and hills there. There's a lot of creeks.
For sure. Yeah.
And as you know, as Jacob described, there's a lot of the craft disappeared behind the tree line.
Very much.
And anywhere you look in that area, there's a tree line
for a craft to disappear behind.
Exactly,
Right.
and probably a field for somewhere for it to land.
Very much.
And this is I don't know if this has been around here, but we got a lot of cornfields here, especially in this area. I've never heard of any crop circles being reported. I know there was some reported years ago in Flemingsburg.
Really?
So, that's very interesting. I'm curious if anybody had those type of reports maybe in the last 20, 30 years.
For sure. And not only that, the area about where Jacob's talking about is our hometown, which we mentioned a lot in UFOs over Central Kentucky last week. But it's pertinent to mention, I feel like, that on October 24th, 1974, the anniversary just happened a few days ago. There was a lady in Russell Springs who reported two diminutive red-skinned entities that walked through our carport, got in a UFO, and flew off.
Exactly.
So, I mean, the area is definitely, as odd as it is, because you don't hear it a lot in the towns, you don't hear it a lot in the talk of people from around here. We're a pretty big hotspot in Kentucky, I feel like. And you and I didn't even realize this till we started doing the show.
Right. Until we started kind of diving into historical reports and doing a lot of research, we didn't realize it either.
Right.
About 30 miles up the road is the Stanford abductions.
Very much
which
so.
is...
I was going to mention that as well, yeah.
Yeah, which is one of the most documented abductions that's noted outside Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, besides Betty and Barney Hill, the Stanford abduction is the abduction that ufologists go to as a case for abductions, So, very interesting, very interesting. Again, we want to thank Jacob very much for sharing his story with us. Next, we're going to go to Tony's story about what happens late at night when you're in Kentucky's waterways all alone.
I started working at the dock in July, but they didn't move me to security because they needed me to fill in an area at the tool room for a while until probably late August. And the guys working with there, he had told me, other stories and stuff like that already from people that had been there before. And that, he told me that, not to be surprised if I heard noises in rooms and stuff that anything shouldn't be coming from it, let's put it that way. Honestly, I didn't necessarily believe it. I thought, every time you work somewhere, they always have a story to mess with the new guy, And we were sitting in an area called the ER. That's where we kind of sit at nights in between our rounds. And all of a sudden, attached to the ER there is the laundry room. So we're sitting in there, and all of a sudden there's all these noises coming from the upstairs of the laundry room. And I kind of get up, and I'm like, should we go check that out? And he's like, oh, no. He goes, there's nothing there. And I said, well, something's there. He goes, those are the noises I was telling you about. But we also have raccoons in the area, too. So, all around there. So I thought, well, okay. Kind of rationalize that a little bit. But then I was on my own one night. It was probably the first nights I was actually by myself. And I hear those noises. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go check this out. If it's a raccoon, I'll be able to see, obviously. So I went into the laundry room. And the door that goes up to the attic area, that's where they kind of store all their extra stuff, it was locked. Well, not locked, but the deadbolt, the padlock was over it. So you could, obviously nobody had gone up there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to catch these raccoons up there. And I go up there, and not only is there no raccoons, there's not even any spot for a raccoon to have got in there. But there was shit just kind of slung. Like, I mean, there was, like, up there they have, like, extra utensils and stuff like that, and they'll have kind of stuff for the grills and all that. And, I mean, it was not just, like, it just falling over. I mean, there was stuff in one area, and then, like, across the room there was a bunch of other stuff. And even then, like, I was like, well, I don't really know what had fallen down, you know, like maybe during the day. So I didn't really know. And I purposely picked it all up that night. And so I go on my rounds, and there's two rental rows, the 5 and the 600. That's where they store the boats that they actually rent out to customers. And I was walking up the first row, is the 500 row, and there was very clearly, there was a guy, like, there's a light at the end of the row, and one of the big floodlight type things, and there was very clearly somebody, like, standing towards the end of that thing. And I watched this guy walk on one of the boats when I was walking up there. I'm like, okay, somebody's messing around. It's my job. I'm a security guy. Go run him off. So I went ahead and had my flashlight out. Stuff went on the boat that he watched on. Of course, I'm keeping an eye on the area. I want to make sure I don't see him get off the boat, you know, and all that. And I get out there, and there's not a soul out there on that boat. And I know that I seen somebody walk on that boat. It was very clear. So I went ahead and got off the boat, and I started walking away. And for some reason, I just felt like I needed to turn around. And when I turned around, I watched the guy walk back on the boat. It's like he'd walked off the boat when I got off there and walked off, and then I turn around, and he walks back on. So I go back out there, and I mean, at this point, I'm kind of pissed off, and I'm ready to beat the hell out of somebody. And I go out there again. There's nobody there. So there's a gap in between that boat and the next boat next to it, where another boat could have been, but it was just an empty spot. So there's no way that he, like, walked onto another boat. There just wasn't. But there was absolutely nobody there. So the next night I'm working, and I went ahead, and I'm sitting in the ER, and then, I mean, it sounded like, I mean, literally somebody was up there throwing things. The first night it was just like stuff was falling over, but the next time it was almost like somebody was throwing stuff. So I went up there, and again, that door has the padlock on it. It's not locked, but it's locked to the point where anybody went up those steps, they're not be able to lock it back. So I went up there again, and again, there's more stuff slung everywhere. But it's not like it was the same stuff. And it was like somebody got pissed and was taking, like, I mean, because there was, up there's like some cleaning supplies. And it almost looked like somebody took their arm and just kind of raked them down. And I was like, well, I ain't messing with that. I ain't cleaning up all this mess. That's not my job. I mean, this was somebody pissed off. And there's no way the people that ran the laundry room, I mean, they do their job, especially those bosses and stuff. There's no way they would have left it that way. And if somebody had done it, they would have made them go clean it up. And then after that, you know, like, I would hear stuff, you know, kind of rummaging around up there, and I kind of got to the point where, kind of like the one guy that said, you kind of get used to it. Well, it got to the point where, like, when I'd walk the 5 and 600, like, after that, like, it almost felt like I was getting stared at from somebody on these boats. So I'd go by, every time I'd go past these boats, I'd purposely shine my light in the boat. Because, I mean, it just, like, I had this overwhelming feeling somebody was staring at me. And I was like, okay. And there was a few boats that, like the other security guard, like, he had told me, you know, about this stuff, of course. But, it was just so weird. I just always felt like somebody was watching me. And I would get to the point where, like, I almost felt like somebody's walking up on me. And I mean, and sometimes I almost heard, like, the boards there, like the last GM didn't keep up with the dock very well. So there would be boards that were weak and they'd make noises. And there'd be times, like, I swear I heard that noise. And I mean, I would quick, like, I'd have my flashlight kind of on my arm so I could quick turn around without it being noticed that I'm getting ready to turn around. Not a soul there. And then all of a sudden, like I said, the last security guard there, he told me that sometimes the bosses and stuff will kind of almost check on you, see if you're doing your job. They'll leave the boats on sometimes, leave lights on and we were, if those were left on, we had to go and turn them off. Well, there was a night that there was on the 500 row alone, there was 2 boats left on, several lights left on, but there was a couple. The only thing that was on, it was like somebody left the microwave open, and that's the only light on in the whole place. Okay. And granted, I mean, somebody could have they could have been cleaning the microwave and left it open and stuff. But I got to the point where I was going on there and shutting those off. And then I went out to the 600, and it was the very same situation. Well, then I did that, and my whole routine was I did the 5, the 6, and then I did the front of the dock, and then I went and did the private slips. Well, I shut off every boat that night, and of course I was still new, so if they were testing me, I could kind of understand to make sure I'm not sleeping on the job or whatever. So I was very sure to turn those off. I didn't want to get in trouble, didn't want to lose my job. It was pretty much the easiest job in the world, and I didn't want to lose that. And so I went ahead and did that and walked the private slips. And then every hour and a half to 2 hours, I would do my rounds. Well, I only did the 5 and 600. I did those 3 times a night. When I first get there, in the middle of the night, and then at the end. Well, I come around the front. I come around where the restaurant is, and I'm getting ready to kind of go around the front. And I noticed that lights were on again. And I'm like, I just turned every one of those off. And I'm like, okay, maybe I forgot one. And then, but the thing about it was that so were the microwaves. They were open again. And I almost had this feeling, almost like I was being tempted to come on the boat again. Like these microwaves are left open for me to come onto the boat, because every other light would be off on the boats that had the microwaves open. Those were the only things that were on. So I sit there and I went down to 500. I shut them all again. I sit there and I'm coming around the corner. Like I said, it wasn't even time for me to do the 5 and 600 yet. But then I look over and lights on the boats on the 600. And I know of at least 2 of those boats. Those were the lights I had just turned off. And I'm like, okay, there's somebody out here messing with me. And honestly, I thought it might have been, I thought he might have been, because we used to goof around like that. I mean, him and I got along pretty well. And so I'm like, what the hell? And then I'm coming across the front, and there was 4 boats on the front. And because they'd bring them to the front so they'd get ready for the people coming in the next day, they'd be ready to take off. And those lights were on. And I'm like, I know. So I sit there and search that whole place. And there was not a soul there. And I'm like, okay. So I'll go ahead, and I just did that. When I do the rounds in between, basically they were just kind of go and make sure the doors were still locked and all that. Well, I turned all those lights off again. And that was another thing. One of the boats I turned off was on. But we did have a guy that was, he'd get drunk. He's having family problems there and stuff. And he'd go, and sometimes he'd stick around and he'd sleep it off on one of the boats. But he wasn't there that night, so I knew it wasn't him. And so by the time I come back around, it's ready to do the 5 and 600 again, in the middle of the night, some of those lights are back on again. Both on the 5 and the 600. And then I come around the front and some of them were on the front. And I'm like, hell it is. I ain't doing it. There's something that is purposely wanting me to come on these boats. And I've dealt with enough of this stuff in my past that I know that I don't really want to mess with this. Like, if they're doing this for, whatever's doing this is doing it for a reason. And I'm not messing with that. Well, there's also, like, there's a, like, on the front of the boat where the fuel piers are. That's where, that's where the boats come in and everybody loads up, and that's where they fuel them up. There's speakers out there during the day. They got music playing all the time. And sometimes it was, it's like somebody, whoever day shift or whatever, didn't turn them off. You'd hear them. And then there was some nights it was dead silent. I mean, it was especially once winter started coming, it was dead silent. But there'd be times when you'd go around there, and I'd just done rounds an hour and a half before, and there was no music. But then I'd walk the front, and all of a sudden, and it was always the same speaker. It was the last fuel pier before you got to the private slips. And you'd hear music. And I was like, well, maybe I just missed it last time. Maybe I left it on. Like I said, they did that sometimes, But I would sit there, I'm like, no, I know it was dead silent. And then one night I was walking past, and it was like, it was getting louder. Like the music, it was just music, but I mean, it would almost like it was getting louder and louder and louder when I'd go past it. And then by the end of the night, you didn't hear nothing. But the one night that really freaked me the hell out was I'd almost got half used to that too. I'd kind of like, okay, all right, I'm pretty sure there's something's going on here anyway. So, but it was dead silent. I'd made 2 or 3 rounds by that time of the night. And this is as it's the season's starting to end. You're getting to probably this time of the year, maybe a little bit earlier, but not much. I mean, everything was pretty winding up, and you didn't really see that many people. I'm walking, and as I get to that speaker, it cuts on, and it's Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd, and it was the whole hello, hello. You know what I mean? And like I was like, oh shit, It was, of all songs, that song and where it started. I mean, it was just like somebody almost reaching out. That's how it felt. And I got cold chills up my spine when it did that. I love the song. It was a great song, but I mean, I didn't really want to hear it then. That was just kind of minor stuff at the time. Then there was a night that, like I said, winter was coming on, and there are a few people that live out there on the private slips. There's people that have like fishing charter services, and they just live off there, and they have their fishing boat there, and they kind of run it off the dock. Well, one of the girls that works in the ship store there, and her mom and her live on one of those boats, and her dad's one of the ones that runs the fishing charter services. Well, they were coming back from walking their dog. They take the dog off the dock, of course, so he used the bathroom and stuff. And they were coming up behind me, and I guess I should say I was coming around the front of the dock, and they were kind of coming around between the areas between the office and the restaurant area, and it kind of curves around and meets there just before you get to the private slips. Well, as I'm coming across the front of the docks, there's a guy standing just on the other side of the gate. Of course, the gate's never locked. I don't even know why they have it there. He's just kind of standing there, and I'm kind of looking at him. I'm like, what's this dude doing? I mean, just standing there, and I mean, I couldn't see who it was. It was almost just like a shadow it was dark in that area. And so I couldn't really make out any features. It was just a guy bigger than me, a little bit taller than I was and stuff. And these 2 women, they're coming up behind me. We kind of met at the same spot. And I was a little bit ahead of them. I mean, probably just a couple steps, and I went through the gate, and they were behind me. And I look, and the guy's gone. So I'm sitting there, I look off to the side where some of the smaller boats would be, and I'm trying to find out, where's this dude go? And like I got my flashlight through there, and I didn't see. I mean, like I seen his shadow. I seen a shadow of somebody standing there, just off one of the things there. And I kind of put my flashlight through there, but when I went my flashlight through, I didn't get anybody. It was like I seen the shadow, but then when I put my flashlight through there was nobody there. And they're talking. The two women are talking, not to me, to each other. And all of a sudden, I hear a guy say, "Hey, how's it going?" But the women didn't react. I was like, "Hey, how is it? How you going?" Type thing. But the women didn't react, almost as if they didn't hear anything. But the voice actually sounded just like a guy that I worked with. He works day shift, and I mean, he would come out there a lot of times, go fishing at nights on days. Well, brother works with the guy, so I sit there and message, say, "Man, ask him if he was working." And I said, "'Cause that just tripped me right out." And then he messaged me back. He said, "No, he wasn't out there that night. He didn't fish." But I mean, it was very clearly. I mean, it sounded just like his voice. I wasn't expecting to hear a voice, especially when I could see his shadow in the dark. But when I put my flashlight, it was like there was no body there. Let's put it that way. But like, and then after I did the flashlight and I heard that, and I went to look back, like I didn't even see the shadow anymore. But I just kept on walking, kept on going, and so when I came back, after I went out to the end of the private slips to come back, I was watching that area, like every one of those little smaller slips there, not a soul. And then probably, I said, this stuff all seemed to happen like once it started building, and it was like fast. Well, probably a couple weeks later, I mean, I kept hearing the noises like I always did. So, like I said, you just kind of almost get used to it. It wasn't like anything was reaching out and grabbing me or anything, so you don't even, I mean, it's like, if they ain't doing that, I don't care. And then, like, there's, in between the sections of the dock on the private slips, there's a metal grate that kind of covers over, you step on it. And when you step on those, it's loud, and there's something about it at night down there. I almost felt like I had to be silent. I felt like if I made a noise, something or somebody was going to hear that, but I didn't want to. And so I'm walking, I'm almost to the end of the private slips, and I hear somebody step on one of those metal things. So I turn around and jump the hell out of me. I mean, as far as I knew, I mean, there might have been a couple of families out there, but this is like 2:30 in the morning. There ain't nobody going to be up. And I turn around, and I'm probably, I'd say, 90 to 100 feet away. I mean, I could see because the private slips are a lot more bright. They have more lights out there. So I turn around, and there is, I mean, he's probably about 6'4" or 6'5". Just a skinny, all I could see was gray. That's all I could see. And he was walking, like, horizontal to the, like, if the dock is going straight, he was crossing it. And, like, as this person or whatever it was is walking across, it doesn't stop, but its head clearly turned and looked at me, and then turned back and walked off. And I'm like, what the hell? So I went back with my flashlight again, and I got looking. If he was to walk across the dock, I figured, that I'm sitting there trying to rationalize it in my head, and I'm thinking, where did he go? But on the other side of the dock, he basically would have walked right in the water. There was nothing there for him to, like, hide from. And something 6'4", 6'5", you're going to kind of notice that. And I got back there, and it was like, what in the shit was that? Like, I mean, it was very cold. Like I said, it was cold. And I remember I walked really fast to get off that dock. But I noticed from that moment that even on nights that I didn't see anything, or I wasn't scared or anything like that. I mean, I was like, there was times that I would almost get images in my head as I'm walking the docks, and of kind of like almost demonic type faces would pop in my head, and they were so real that I, honest to God, felt like I would be very nervous after I'd feel that, because it was like my body and my mind was expecting to see these things. Bam, it just popped in my head for no apparent reason, and immediately I'd get on edge. I mean, a lot of times at nights and stuff, especially in the winter where there's nobody out there, I wear headphones and listen to music while I'm walking, so I'm not thinking about these things at all. And I'd get that, man. I would stop the music right there because I wanted to be sure I could hear everything. And that continued, basically until I stopped working at the dock. Before, again, this is one of the things that I thought the security guard that I was trained me, everybody kind of messes with the new guy and stuff. But he was telling me about a story about this other security guard that worked there a couple years before, that was sitting in the laundry room, the same area where I would hear that stuff upstairs. And this great big tall, almost whitish figure walked past the door on the outside, and again, this is in the middle of winter, so nobody's supposed to be there, and I guess he was a retired cop, so he grabbed his gun, he went on out there and looked. There was not a soul there, and that really tripped him out, but I mean, just the thought of that. But there was times, there was one incident that was in the middle of the winter. I mean, I would still have to, even in the middle of winter when it was cold and all that, I still had to do my rounds. So I sit there and I put on my Carhartts and all that, getting ready to walk. And they said that, the whole dock is frost over, especially with all that moisture on in the air and stuff. The dock would frost over real quick, so you could see footprints pretty easy. Well, I come out the door of the ER. They call it the ER because it's where the maintenance people sit, and that's it was kind of their emergency room when they needed parts and stuff that the tool room didn't order for them. They could always scavenge off stuff they'd bring in there. That's why it was called the ER. I guess I should have explained that a little bit better. So I'm sitting there. I step out of the ER area, and right on as you walk out the ER, to your right, there was there's two refrigerators, and there was, at the time, there was this great big screen door there, so you couldn't see around it, but I'm sitting there zipping up my Carhartt jacket, and I hear a woman very clearly say, well, he should be around here somewhere. And then I kind of stopped, did I actually hear that? And then she said something else, but I couldn't understand what it was. So I'm thinking there's somebody out there looking for me. So I step around the corner. I said, ma'am, there's nobody there. And so I start to kind of walk around, and I stopped, and I looked. There's no footprints in this frost at all. Nothing. And this woman probably was within 6 to 7 feet to me, the way the sound was. Like I said, I walked around the refrigerators and all that, expecting there to be somebody there that needed help or was looking for me in some way. And there was nothing. But I went ahead and looked all over the dock anyways. Went in, the offices were all locked up. I walked into the offices anyways, even though I know that you have to lock that from the outside. There was nobody there. And I looked again, I sit there, in the cold, I'm just sitting there looking for, I wear a size 11. So, I'm not, if there's a smaller footprint, I'm going to notice it. And there was nothing there. Nothing. But then, I mentioned that to the other security guard. And, he wasn't working there at the time. He switched to days. They needed him on days for a while. And, he almost got, just pale white. He was like, dude, I heard that same thing. Some woman saying he should be around here somewhere. And he goes, again, I went looking for her because I was expected to see somebody needing my help. And there was nobody there. And then later on, and this is closer to when it started to get a little warmer. I'd say this is probably late February. I'm in the laundry room at this point because it got to the point where, like, in the ER area, they cut off the heat. So they just kept a fan going constantly and stuff overnight. So the laundry room was a little bit warmer. So I was sitting there, and my back was to where that door I told you about that went up to the attic area where I seen all that stuff knocked down. And it's probably 3 o'clock, 3:30, something like that. Honestly, I was fighting staying awake. I mean, I had my tablet in front of me. I was sitting there watching TV and stuff, and all of a sudden, like, the door that went up there to the attic, the same spot I told you that, you know, it had that lock on it, like something from upstairs came down, like something. It sounded like almost like a great big box had fallen down the steps and banged into that door. And I mean, I jumped about 3 feet out of my pants. I mean, I was like, what the hell? I mean, especially when you're half asleep. So I sit there and I went over there, and again, the door's locked. And I'm like, well, maybe they had a box up there. That's where they kept like the great big boxes of their toilet paper and paper towels and stuff like that. And so I'm expecting something to have fallen down the steps. But at the same time, it already dealt with enough stuff at that dock that I was kind of prepared. I pulled out my knife, and I had it in my right hand. I opened up that door with my left, and I was ready to just stab whatever was there. There was nothing there. Nothing falling down steps. I went up there that time. Nothing is disturbed. But something hit that door hard enough that, like, the lock on it shook. And so I was like, this isn't kosher, let's put it that way. Then after that, come March, I actually switched jobs for a while. So me and my wife could try to have more time together, but I didn't care for it. So when I went back, once I started back, they had hired 2 people right after I had started, you know, and by this time I wasn't working there anymore. And I told them these stories. And none of them, I don't think either one of them really believed it, you know, stuff. But there was one night we were all in the ER, and I was kind of, you know, training them a little bit and stuff, and not exactly as if there was much to train, but all of a sudden those noises up in that attic started. And the one guy, he was just like, what the hell? It flipped him out. Me and the other guy, we went up there. Me and Luke went up there, and I showed him. And there was stuff that wasn't messed up like it was that first time I went up there. But there was stuff on the floor. And, you know, it was very clear. It sounded like somebody walking. It's not so much like moving stuff around as much as walking on those. I mean, we're just talking about plywood, so it's very, you know, noisy. And it was very clear. And then we were sitting there another night. Me and the one that didn't want to go up there. We were sitting there one night, and he goes, I don't think I want to sit here in the ER, because we were hearing it again. He's like, I don't know if I want to sit here in this ER. He's like, I don't think I'm going to be sitting here over the winter. He goes, I can't do this. And then the next, like, he worked on his own one night. I didn't come in because he only worked on the weekends, and it was for some reason I didn't come in one day. And he was telling me the next time I seen him that he was still hearing those steps up there. And he wasn't going to go up there and look, but I mean, he was hearing them, and but he was like, "Yeah, I'm not sitting here anymore." And as best of my knowledge, I don't think he did unless I was with him. I mean, I don't think he ever set foot in that ER by himself. But I tell you, another thing is that, like, that was the year, that was the winter that the whole place flooded and stuff, and I was having to sit up there at at the top of the ramp, so people wouldn't go down there on the dock when it was all closed up, and for safety issues and stuff. And I remember sitting there, and I watched a guy walk up the ramp from the dock. And again, like the best of my knowledge, there was nobody there. They weren't supposed to be there, And like he walked up and he stopped like about almost to where they had the caution tape was, and I was getting ready to get out to go, and like he turned around and started walking off, almost like he seen me and started kind of not running but kind of moving kind of quick. So I'm thinking, okay, there's somebody been messing around there. He sees me, and he's like, oh shit, So I went down there. I was probably only about 20 feet, from where that was and stuff. So I got in my car real quick and I walked down there. I was like, sir. And of course the ramp goes straight down. There's nowhere to hide. You can see. And there was nobody there. But it was almost like whatever it was, came up and looked at me and seen me. And this looked like an actual person, like clothes and all that. But, cause it was the middle of winter, it kind of bundled up, but, it only took me a matter of 30 seconds, 40 seconds to get to where he was at, cause I got out and I'm like, oh shit, And, but there was nowhere for him to go, and he wasn't there. And there was no cars there, so, that's all open up an area. And there's a rock wall on one side, and then there's water on the other side. There's nowhere for him to go. And like I said, I walked all the way down the ramp to the water. Not a soul there. I was out on the private slips. Actually, not far from where I was when I seen the great big tall guy. And it was actually at the end of the ramp, at the end of the private slips. But again, like I told you, I was pretty much towards the end anyways. And so I'm turning around, getting ready to walk. It was kind of like a habit, kind of a thing. I'd go to the end, I'd stop, and there was like these 3 little lights out in the water, like kind of reflectors and stuff. And my routine was to go there, hit those 3 reflectors with my flashlight, and turn around. As I'm turning around, well, I guess I should, before that, the first time I heard this howl was when the dock was shut down and Jamestown was completely flooded. And I was coming around the front of the dock, and I heard that it was like a wolf, but so much deeper. But it had that long, it was long and drawn out. And I remember sitting there like, I'm glad I'm on this side of it. Because there's that little channel area, and I was like, damn, I'm glad I'm on this side. Well, probably a week later, I'd say, maybe 2, is when I heard it again. And when I was out at the end of the private slips, I did my little checks, like I said, with the flashlight, and I'm turning around. But this time, it was, like I said, it was deeper, and it was, and so when I went, I was like, what the hell? So I went to the end, and I, like, with the flashlight I had, like, I could see, it was pretty good. And I went in the little tree line there, didn't see anything, and I turned, it was like, it didn't do it when I did that. As soon as I did that, it stopped. I turn around, take 3 or 4 steps, and it does it again. I go back to the end of the dock, and I'm sitting there, nothing. Well, that was with that, but the explosions I heard, honestly, this freaks me out more than the great big tall guy. Because I'm in the ER area, and, when I say explosion, I don't mean just like a big bang. I mean an explosion. Like, I came running out there, and honestly, I expected to see a boat, because this is when it's warm. This is when I come back to the dock about a month after I left. I come back because I didn't like that other job, and so it was nice out. It's warm and stuff, and so I was expecting a boat had crashed into the dock. So I go running out there, and I run out to the front of the dock, and there's nothing there, and then, like, I hear him again, and there was 17 in all. And again, when I say explosion, I don't mean just a big bang. I mean, like, I was expecting to see honestly, this was probably mid-July. So I thought it was somebody shooting off extra fireworks, But I was like, damn, they must be awful friggin' big. But there was, like, I kept hearing there was, and, like, it kept sounding like they were coming from out on the private slip. And that's another thing. Like, the first one sounded like it was right there in the front of the dock. And then, like, the explosions kept going on. But it was almost like, as they were going on, they were moving out on the private slips. And so I kept walking out there. There was 17 in all. And, like, I walked down the private slips. I'm expecting, of course, it's July. I mean, it was late. I mean, we're talking about, again, 2 o'clock in the morning or so. And everybody, even the ones that were partying, had closed it up by this time. But I expected to go out there and see a bunch of people looking around like, what the hell is that? But I walk all the way out to that end of the private slips, like I said, and I'm hearing them constantly. But I'm looking in the sky and looking, for flashes of light anywhere. There's nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And so the other guy that I worked with, he actually lives just outside the park. I mean, he'd come down there every once in a while, even on his nights off, just to kind of bullshit because he was bored. So next time I seen him, a few days later, I worked with him. I was like, man, did you hear those crazy explosions the other night? And he looks at me and goes, when? I said, 2 or 3 nights ago. I said, were you awake at 2 o'clock or so? And he was like, oh yeah. He goes, now I'm on this schedule. I have to kind of stay on that. And I was like, you didn't hear those? And he was like, no. And the reason I thought the first one somebody hit the dock, because like when I was in the ER, like the explosion was so bad, like the dock kind of moved a little bit. That's why I thought somebody drunk or something on their boat come driving in there. Because throughout the night, you'd have some people, like especially the charters, they'd come and go to the fuel pier and fuel up on their own. So I thought some drunk dumbass come and smashed in the front of the dock, and I'm saying, oh great, that's just what I want to deal with. And because my bosses were not easy to get hold of in the middle of the night. And I go out there, and it was like every time I go out on the private, and I go farther and farther on the private steps, it was almost like, I felt honestly almost like drawn out to the end of the private step. And that's where I seen the great big tall guy. And I remember sitting there and like nobody, I mean, these are huge explosions. And people probably hadn't even been quieted down for maybe an hour. So there was some people that probably were still sitting on their boats, you just didn't hear them that much because it was quieter. But I mean, like, it was like nobody heard anything. But there was absolutely no explanation for that whatsoever. None. And anybody ever mentioned it to it. I even mentioned it to some of the people that I knew on the private slips. Because like I said, some of the people run those fishing charter services off there, and I knew them. And I asked them, I said, do you hear that crazy explosion the other night? None of them had heard either. But, I mean, I heard it clear. I mean, it was like, because I was outside when I heard the others. I tell you, it was like bursts of 3. Like, you'd get bang, bang, bang. And then when I got outside the ER, there was bang, bang. And then when I got to the front of the dock, like when it started sounding like it was coming from the private slips, that it was again burst of 3, then a space, and then a burst of a couple, and then another burst of 3. I mean, it was like that. It was, but if somebody was setting off fireworks, you would have seen the lights. There was nothing. It was dead. It was dark as hell. The only thing about the dock is that you always hear. It's a big thing. Paranormal experiences, coincide with the dock. Well, the dock is, that lake is man-made, and so many graves were flooded when they made that, and in the dock, the water there, it's constantly moving. There's always a current through it. And they say, I've watched a lot of this stuff over the years and stuff, that, they say that especially moving water has a big deal, to do with this stuff. And you figure if you've flooded graves. There was shoot, last year alone, not this past summer, but the summer before, when I was working, there was 3 deaths down there. There was one poor lady, I felt so bad for her. I come in, and there was like all these cops at on the end of the 500 rental row, on this houseboat with people, and I'm thinking, oh God, I'm coming in here, starting work, and there's already a big mess going on. And of course, people they'd get on those rental rows before they'd go out the next day, and they'd party it up. So I'm thinking, well, hell, I'm going to come in here and do a mess. But come to find out, the woman had, it was like, I think she said it was like 18 years or something. It was, a great big span of time. Her and her husband came there every anniversary. Well, they were out, and her husband jumped off the boat to go swimming. I guess there wasn't, the wind wasn't blowing at the time or whatever, and he was sitting there swimming, but the wind started picking up, and the boat started floating off, and they found him, like, I think it was like a week and a half later. He finally surfaced in one of the little coves there, and then I said there was one of the workers there. I actually knew pretty well. He died of a heart attack during a poker run, and one of the guys that had the fishing charter services, one of the better known people around here, he had a heart attack and died out there too. That same summer that I experienced all this. The guy that worked there that I knew that died, I felt so bad because I guess he had actually been offered the security job before me. Of course, I didn't know it. I was actually hired for the tool room, but when I went to start my first day, they asked me if I'd rather do security. Well, I don't think he was necessarily mad at me because, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I think he was kind of perturbed, let's put it that way, that he was given a, for sure, year-round job, and now it was looking like he was going to get laid off. Well, after poker run, after he died, you have to drive past the road that goes down to the maintenance building because it's actually the boat dock road that goes down there. And I remember I always felt when I would not look in my rearview mirror after I'd go past there because there was just something I expected to look in my rearview mirror and see him sitting in my back seat. And I remember, years ago, from other paranormal, stuff that, people would say that if going down, I think it's in Arizona, there's a road that if you go down it and you don't have your door locked, if in this one certain area you look up, there'll be a woman sitting in your back seat. And I remember before I went past that road for probably 3 weeks that I made sure my doors were locked. And I don't really think locks probably stop, ghosts or whatever from doing what they want. But it was like, I remember that story from Arizona, and I'm like, well, sure as hell, I'm going to try it now, Probably 3 days after that, after he had passed away, I was on my way home. It was, early in the morning, and it was still dark out and stuff. And he was taller, skinny fella, probably about 6'2", 6'3", something like that. And he always wore, the red shirt, the red T-shirt for maintenance and stuff, and he always had, khaki shorts on, always. Well, I was on my way home. I was going up 55, actually. I turned off at 127, turned left on 55 to head up to 379. I guess you all call it the Hills Highway or something like that. And I bet you I hadn't been on 55, but maybe a mile. And, we're talking, I think I actually left early that night. I was sick. So we're talking about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was early. And there's this great big tall, skinny, bald guy in a red T-shirt and khaki shorts hitching a ride. Now, I remember what that guy, it wasn't the guy I knew, but it was just so weird. You're talking about 3 or 4 days later, and this guy's, got his thumb out. Well, just seeing him in the damn red shirt and khaki shorts freaked me the fuck out. So I'm like, well, that's good. I'm just going around this guy. But this guy purposely walked out towards the middle of the road. I had to go out and around him. And I guarantee you, I probably hit 80 going up, going up 55, because I was like, hell no, I'm getting out of here. But it was awful weird. And especially since how, not only was he trying to hitch the ride, but when I started to go around him, he walks out towards the middle of the road, towards me. Yeah, it was definitely very, very odd.
We want to deeply thank Tony for sharing his story with us. And, jeez, what a story it is. There's a lot going on there. Give us your thoughts on it.
There's just a lot of shit down there on the lake, period. But these stories blow my mind.
Oh, yeah.
There's, everything from, the mysterious booms to just, these disembodied voices to a cryptid down there, which sounded to me like it could be something of maybe a large gray.
Yeah.
Or even a Slender Man type.
Yes, very
entity.
Much so. The Slender Man is exactly what I thought of when he first told that story.
But one thing was apparent through those stories is that Tony was being lured or toyed with by this entity or cryptid or whatever the universe has put down there.
Right, yeah.
And, and another thing, I guess going back on the history of the area, I would love to know what was previously under the lake, before the lake, what was under that previously. If that was one of the graveyards, maybe that was dug up?
He mentions the lake and the graveyards and how, how these paranormal things tie in, like David Pilates makes note of, the running water. Yeah. There's always running water with these paranormal things. And he says, the running water and these graves that were, washed over to make the lake, maybe that energy collected is what did it.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of negative energy in that location. Yeah. And across there's two docks. So there's the Jamestown, then there's the State Dock. And both of them's pretty much in the same location, although they're on separate ends of how you get to them in the county, but they end up in the same spot.
Right. Yeah.
There's just been a lot of interesting things that happens down there, and Tony just really did a good job describing all of his experiences.
Very much so. Very much so. There's a lot to this. There's mystery people. These people that aren't necessarily shadow people. They look like normal people, but they disappear. Without warning. There's the shadow people that he's reported, in addition to the mystery people.
Yeah.
There's the tall gray being that I find it very interesting, moved Sasquatch-like he described it like a Sasquatch, but it wasn't a Sasquatch, but it moved like the creature in the Patterson Gimlin film, the major Bigfoot, the one of the most popular, the most famous Bigfoot videos. There's the disembodied howls, the mystery explosions, like we've talked about several times on this, but it seems like those explosions in this instance were localized just to Tony.
Right.
And it almost sounds to me like these explosions, he describes it as a 1, 2, 3, stop. 1, 2, 3, stop. It's very common with Whitley Strieber's entities that he talks about in Communion and his other books with the knocking. It's not explosions in those books, but it's the knocking on walls and on doors. It's the 1, 2, 3, stop. 1, 2, 3, stop. And I also find it interesting that he mentions that the level of activity slowly ramped up as he noticed it. It's talked about at Skinwalker Ranch. It's talked about in a lot of poltergeist instances, the Bell Witch.
Yeah. This honestly reminded me a lot of the Skinwalker Ranch.
Very much
things
so.
going on.
Very much so. And, I hadn't even really put that together, even though I just mentioned it. I hadn't put that together, but it is very Skinwalker Ranch, isn't it? There's the disembodied howls, there's the disembodied voices, poltergeist activity.
Things disappearing, maybe.
Entities.
It's like how these entities have projected themselves into different figures down there.
Very much so. Very much so. And there's a lot of synchronicity with this too, which there is with Skinwalker Ranch. The music thing, with the music thing coming on and Comfortably Numb. With hello, hello, hello. Dude, that's straight out of a Stephen King book,
That was very freaky there.
Very, very much so. And he mentions something that is one of my favorite parts of paranormal experiences. He mentions how he just kind of got used to it.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people that deal with these things just kind of get used to it, you know. Very interesting. He also mentions that most of these things happen between, which he worked third shift, he worked at night, but he also mentioned that most of these things happen between midnight and 4 a.m., which, as we called it at the beginning of the show, is the witching hour. Mm-hmm. That's when these things most commonly happen. Not only that, he mentions that it's this time of year when these things really picked up. And of course, harvest, Halloween, Samhain, this is when the veil is traditionally thought to be thinnest between our world and whatever lies beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I did pick up on, is the times these were occurring was, as you said, from midnight to 4 a.m.
Right.
And a lot of weird things happen during that time.
Oh, yeah.
Just in my experience of, taking call for several years, that's when the majority of the main calls were the wildest thing you're going to get on call for, where, the transformer is going to blow and take the server room down. Right. You're going to get a call during that time frame.
Again, we want to deeply thank Tony for his story. Now, we go from isolation on Kentucky's waters to isolation in a Kentucky home. This is Lucy's story.
It was in 2011. It was July, because I had just had my first kid. We had just gotten released from the hospital a few days before, and I had never liked to be at the house by myself anyways. It had to be an older house, because the people we were renting off of was like probably in their 50s anyways, and this was her mom and dad's home. It was honestly so old that when you open the basement door and you look down, there were like top on top of steps. They weren't actually slanted out to where you could walk into it really, but when you look straight ahead at the wall on the other side of the basement, it was nothing but a big hole. Like the whole bottom had been carved into. I guess it was unfinished, but even being unfinished, there was a big hole, like a big huge black hole that was through the wall. I mean, it wasn't a room that just had a floor and the walls and whatnot, whatever. There was an actual hole that I could probably go stand in. I have no idea how far it went out, because I never went down through there. I don't know why it was there. I have no idea how long it had been there. I don't know if these people actually ever went into it themselves. I have no idea on anything other than you could open the door, because when you walked in through the front door, you would have the living room, and straight through the living room was the kitchen. If you look straight ahead, that was the sink, but if you turned to the right, there were two doors. One was to the outside and the other one was to the cellar, basement, whatever. And if you opened that door, you could stand in the kitchen and look straight ahead, like you were looking down, and you would just be looking into this huge black hole that just went through the wall. We never even found out where the lights were to the room to actually go down there and look at anything. Like it was a door that stayed off limits the whole time we lived there. We would open it, and then we would shut it back. That was all that really managed to happen for that. I was too afraid to even go down the stairs. I don't know if it had like any type of energy thing to it, but just looking at it was scary to the point that you just shut the door. So it was scary enough that the hole and stuff had been there, but I didn't actually get to get a feel for the house. I maybe was there for like a week and then started having trouble with my pregnancy. So we went in to have the baby early, stayed in the hospital for a whole week before getting to even come back home. And I can't remember why. I don't know if it was the house itself. It doesn't make sense to me. All I can remember is the baby slept in the bed with me because it was freezing at nighttime. That does, I can't connect anything to anything with it, but it was the middle of July. Like, she was born the end of July, and here it was so cold of a night that she had to be in the bed with me. It wasn't just cold of a night time. I can remember taking a little heater that plugs into the wall and dragging that sucker by the electrical cord. Not safe. I did it just so I could carry the baby and everything that I had in my hands in one trip, so I wouldn't have to go back and forth through the house, and I would position myself on the couch and stay there all day when I was there by myself. I guess, I don't want to say I was scared, because I wasn't really scared, but something felt off, and I felt powerless because I had to take care of her as well as myself, and I couldn't even take care of myself. But through the night, we had a lamp and a radio. And when we brought her home, where she had stayed in the hospital for a week, she was used to having a noise. So we ended up having to play that radio, and that radio would just static go on and off itself, as well as the lamp. It would turn itself on and off through the night. And we would be in the same room with it, but nobody would be touching anything, so we're not for sure if it was electrical. We never kind of knocked it out of the park of not being electric with the walls where it was an old house. But then one day, I can always remember when my husband went to work, I would want to go to his family's because my family did not live up there. So I would take him, that way I wouldn't have to be at the house by myself. And then that one day, I decided I was going to do it. I said, I'm going to have a kid, I'm going to have to grow up, I'm going to have to be here. So I went ahead. Like I said, I carried those heaters around by their electrical cords. Still can't, for the life of me, remember why it would be so cold that I would need one. It'd be in the middle of July, but I was also taking online courses, and that one specific day I decided to stay there by myself. He had already left for work. He always left by 6 in the morning. I still would brave out enough to stay in bed until 7 or 8ish. And then I would remember feeling like something wasn't right, and I didn't like to be trapped back down the hallway in the back bedroom. So that morning I woke up, I packed all my school stuff into just a grocery sack because it was the only thing I had, and I didn't even want to walk through the house to grab something else just to go back and get it. So I got it into a grocery sack. I got the baby stuff together into her diaper bag. I picked her up, and I carried my little heater with the electrical cord all the way up the hallway. Got everything set up in the living room, got on the couch. Everything was fine. I did my schoolwork. I turned the DVD on. I don't even remember what DVD it was, but it bothers me I don't, because I watched it so many times. It actually replayed probably 3 times that morning, and then out of nowhere, it's like I could feel something around me. I have no idea why or where it came from. I was sitting cross-legged on the couch. I had my school book on the couch arm, and the baby had been laying across my lap. And out of nowhere, it sounded like something in my right ear, and I only remember my right ear because there was maybe 3 feet between the couch arm on the right side and the doorway. But it was right there, and it said, "Hey," maybe 3 times. So it freaked me out. I started shaking so bad, and I was trying to call somebody. And the only thing that's, I don't know why or what happened, but the only thing I can remember is I didn't even have time to dial a number, and my husband started to pull in the driveway. So it was kind of odd to me that those events coincided side by side with me freaking out, not knowing what to do, and then 2 seconds later, there he was. I never stayed there by myself again through the day while he was working, and it was maybe 2 weeks later we moved into the apartment. If that, because we did not have the rent we could not afford. Really, the event itself is what pushed me to go. When I say I could not afford that next month, officially I couldn't, but we borrowed money and put more down to get an apartment than we would have had we borrowed money and paid for rent that month. But I don't know if it's where I was always cold and already thinking of the heat, because the house was old enough, it lived on gas heat, and I knew I couldn't afford that if I couldn't afford rent. But on top of that, with everything else that happened, I did not want to be there by myself. So like I said, we went ahead and decided to borrow more money than we would have and pay down payment somewhere else versus borrowing money and paying rent to stay there another month. So like I said, we had the baby July 20th. We dealt with everything at the old house. That event itself, I'm not for sure why. It led me to want to borrow enough money to go elsewhere instead of borrowing enough money to cover the rent. We ended up from July 20th to the end of July finding another place, got lucky enough, moved into this new apartment, and the first few days there, it's like nothing had ever happened at the house before. So with that going down, I kind of just assumed that it was the house itself, with it being old, with the whole big hole in the cellar, basement, whatever it was called. Like I said, I assumed it was the house. I will say, believe it or not, we actually took the lamp with us from that house. So had there been anything tied to that, I probably brought it on with me. But I was kind of relieved and figured that that wasn't the case, because we were there maybe 2 or 3 months at the most. And I kind of started feeling like I did before. I had that same energy, but it was like a honeymoon phase, I guess. So we were there for a certain amount of time. I was fine staying there by myself. I did all my schoolwork through the day. I actually moved throughout the house. I got the nursery ready. I got the bedrooms ready. Didn't have any problem with going back and forth to, said rooms in the house. And then 2 or 3 months in, I started having that feeling again. I thought maybe it was just lack of sleep, because we did have the newborn, versus before. I thought the lack of sleep maybe came from being scared of the old place. And then, out of nowhere, it hit me that there was something that was there. It's not like anything was obvious. I just felt it. And I felt it every day. And each day it got worse. At first, I kind of chalked it up to being in the said apartments that we were in, because we did not live in a safe place. It was still in Somerset, Kentucky. It was actually more downtownish than the old place was, so you would think it would be a little bit better, not being out in the middle of nowhere. But the place that we lived in, the people were, it was a HUD housing type of situation. There were some people that legit needed the help that did have those apartments. And then there were others that were into things they should have never been into, that were my next door neighbors. So I thought at first the scare of not wanting to do anything came from them, because I was afraid to open the door some days, because you never knew who was outside. I was afraid to leave the baby in the living room if I had to go use the bathroom, because you never knew what was going to happen. And I first thought that's where the scare came from, because every time I would go to the bathroom, I would pick her bouncer up and take her with me. Or if I went to the kitchen to make a bottle, I would take her in her bouncer and set her on the kitchen floor to do whatever needed to be done while in the kitchen, and then bring her back with me. But it finally grew, and it just got to the point that, so I guess I should explain, when you walk into the apartment, there's a hallway straight back. When you went straight back, you had 2 bedrooms to your right, the bathroom at the very end of the hall, the kitchen to the left. Well, the living room was actually made out of a right-hand side. So there might have been 12-ish to 15-ish feet or whatever to the right of the door. That was the living room. There was a chair that we had at the far right corner on the wall that the apartment door sat on. And that chair was sitting by the windows. And then, of course, across from the chair was the television. Beside the television was the baby's playpen. We never used the playpen. Not for a long while. So she kind of stayed in her swing nonstop. it got to the point that I stayed confined to that chair. And it wasn't like it was in the old house to where my husband would go to work and then I would wake up. It was, I would feel him getting out of bed, so I would get up the minute he got up, get all my stuff gathered, and try to rush in such a hurry that I had everything together, and me and her and everything that we needed for that whole day was at that corner with that chair and that swing before he walked out the door for work. Like, it got that scary. I don't know if the fear just grew or what happened, but we didn't move for the whole day. I would not eat. I would not even use the bathroom. We just sat there. It was like we were trapped in that one area. So, like I said, we had gotten the apartment the 1st of August. That started a couple of months later. At that point, we went through it for a whole year. I mean, from basically November to November. I did work for about 6 months in that time, so it wasn't as strong because I was not home all day. And when I was home, I really wasn't home alone. I mean, my husband was there. It wasn't just me and the baby. Based on my work schedule, it worked out that I didn't have to do that anymore. But then we found out we were pregnant again, so for those next 6 months, I relived everything I lived before going to work. I just did it while being pregnant with my second child. Well, then we had her. Okay, so after I left work, once I found out, which I had already been pregnant for a few months, found out I was pregnant, decided to stay home with my first child because we had so much trouble. I wanted to experience everything I could with her before having my second. But in that time, it actually drove me more crazy because the whole energy, the being scared, the not wanting to move out of that corner was there. Like, it had never stopped, even in the time that it wasn't happening because I was at work. As soon as I come back home full time, it's like it went right back to the way it was before. It made it kind of worse because at this point my first child was big enough. She wanted to roam more through the house. So I kind of felt like I had barricaded her because I would not let her leave. And when I say leave, I wouldn't let her leave the living room, I mean from the point of she might have moved obviously out of that corner because she wasn't in the swing set anymore, but she would not move past halfway down that wall. I would not let her even get near the hallway door. So we were still kind of confined to that space the whole time I was pregnant. It made it a whole lot worse. I don't know if it was me being scared, if it was me feeling like a bad mother because of the things that were going on, but the emotion, it stayed high. And then I ended up having my second daughter. At this point, my personal life had changed a little bit, so I was going back and forth between my hometown and Somerset. But the times I was in Somerset, I could feel it growing. I would stay there for a few days at a time before going back to Russell Springs. It's like I would split my weeks in half for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And in those 2 or 3 weeks, it's like it was instant growth type of thing. When I say instant growth, I mean from the point of leaving the apartment to go have the baby, it was still just that scared feeling, to the point of the first time I was back from having her. It's like that whole thing, like the whole energy, the whole scared, the whole whatever had engrossed the whole apartment. Like, it even took over the corner I had before. So that went on for a few days for that first week I was there. Well, then the second week I had gotten there is when I'd first seen him. When I say him, he wasn't an actual person. He, it was like he had, like I said, the energy had invaded the whole house, including my corner, but he kind of took over the whole back half of the apartment area, because he claimed stake kind of at the end of the hallway there. And it had gotten so bad that I didn't even want to walk across the hallway door, because I could see him on days that he wasn't like standing there watching. He would be walking, you know, from the bedroom to the kitchen, and you could see him pass through the hallway. He wasn't ever like physically to the point that it got rough, but he was mentally and emotionally mean, I guess. He had, I don't want to say heavy shoes because you can't hear, but he had heavy looking shoes on. They weren't just regular tennis shoes or slippers or anything like that. And in the shadow of him, you could tell that he had a longer shirt on. And he always had this book. Obviously, it was shadowed too. You couldn't make nothing out. But I could tell it was supposed to be a Bible. I don't know why I felt that, but I felt that. He had his hat that he wore all the time. And that first week, it was just seeing him. He never like, other than invading me, never affected me type of thing. Like, he invaded my space. Even being at the end of the hallway, I could feel him through the whole living room, even though he never stepped foot in the living room. And that in itself was odd to me. I don't know if he didn't ever step foot in there because the girls were in there. Like, I don't know what actually kept him from coming in, because I was scared. But it was like he couldn't get that far. But he had the whole other half of the apartment to himself, because I was too afraid to even go back there. And I guess that got harder as well, because I would always have 2 babies to pack and take care of and get to the front of the house before my husband left. My husband still didn't even know this was going on. Like, it was all just me. But the last few weeks, our marriage was already in so many shambles that I hadn't actually stayed as much as I should have. Like I said, I was still splitting my weeks, but my weeks there grew shorter. So splitting would be like a 5-to-2 ratio or something, and I would be in Russell Springs for 5 of the days and up there for like 2. It wasn't a whole 3 here, 4 there type of thing. But it finally, those last few weeks, it got to the point that he wouldn't speak, I guess. It never seemed like it bothered the girls. But he would be angry. And I don't know why. I could probably tell you that some of the anger came from the fact that he couldn't fully get to me, and I believe it was from them. But I feel like he was mean with me, and it was emotionally abusive in a way. It was awful. With my first child, I never used the playpen, so with the catch-all came along throwing the kid in there type of thing, because when the baby needed fed or the baby needed changed, where I was so afraid and did not want the older kid to be running down the hallway with this guy back there that I knew was there but hadn't really actually formed yet, I would throw her in that playpen. Like, that's where she would go. She would be there because I knew she couldn't get any farther than that pen. I restricted her from going back there. But I looked up one day from changing the younger, like the baby, the newborn. And when I did, that's when I first noticed, for real, like, he was standing right there. He was not at the tip end of the hallway like he had worked himself up to, but I had the baby on the couch end, so I wasn't over in my corner. I was kind of even with the playpen. The playpen was sitting right beside the hallway doorway. And when I looked back to be sure that she was okay, that's when I seen it. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't like flush with the door frame at that time, but he was probably 2 to 3 feet back. And I remember being so scared. I know I grabbed the baby, but I don't know if I had even had her changed at that point. I grabbed the playpen and drug the thing all the way over to the window. I don't know why I took residence with that corner, though, because it was like there were all these crazy people outside to begin with that were there for all the wrong reasons. You had your drug dealers, your people breaking in, the crazy stuff, but I felt safer by that window. I don't know if I thought, hey, one day I might need to break out this thing or something, but it was like my connection to the real world type of thing, because in the apartments, the doors there was no window, there was no it was one of those heavy set doors that you see in huge office buildings that kind of flush back together type of doors. So I can remember that being one of the first times that I did actually see him, and him getting that close to the point that it restricted me right back to my corner. And the few days that I did feel brave enough to venture out from that side of the living room, I don't know, I finally got the courage to even say anything to somebody, and it just came down to, you're crazy and you need to go see this therapist. It was all, oh, well, it happens. Sometimes you're home alone after having a baby, whatever. But I knew what I seen, and it was gut-wrenching. And when the times that he stood at the end of the hallway, it would be, some days it would seem like hours. I mean, it wasn't just a 5-minute visit and then he was gone type of thing. In the moments he wasn't at the end of the hallway, it's like I could tell he was back in the other areas of the apartment. But like I said, I was too afraid to even pass by the hallway door to get to the other side of the living room, because I could feel that was happening. The few times I did, like I said, I seen him cross from room to room. And it was enough to keep me from wanting to do it anymore. It went from just, the standing and to me observing, but not just observing. He was, crippling. It was to the point like he was trying to get his power up over me without being able to come toward me type of thing, where he was confined to the hall. But he knew what he was doing at that point. He knew, had the girls not been there, that he could have probably overpowered me completely. When he seen that he had that type of power, it got to the point that that's honestly the first time after that. So I seen him a few times when he realized he had the power and could speak, I guess, in a way, not like physically speak, but speak to me. That's the first time I ever noticed the Bible. I never noticed it before. He probably had it, who knows. It was just a black shadow book. To me, that's what it was. I knew, I won't say in my heart, I knew in my mind that that's what it was. And the only reason I could tell that's what it was is because it's what told me in my mind that it wasn't right. To me, in my mind, him overpowering me when he got mean, I was hearing mean things. I was, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to say hearing, because he wasn't physically speaking. And when I say hearing mean things, it wasn't like you sitting here verbally telling me something emotionally abusive or cussing or yelling. It was not in that form. It wasn't even like it was an English language type of verbally mean. It was just, in my mind, I knew that's what it was. I knew the anger was there. I could make out like he was trying to say mean things, but it wasn't words. But when that started, that's when the Bible came to. That's when I was like, this isn't right. It was bad. It got so bad. My marriage was already in shambles anyways, but it got to the point that when I went and talked to somebody professionally about it, and they told me that I was legit crazy, I realized I didn't belong there. Whether it was personal reasons or not, there was nothing for me. I couldn't even step foot back in there. I'd seen him, once or twice a day there at the very end. And he was always there whether I seen him or not. And they were both always abusive. They were not friendly meetings. They were, like I said, hours at a time. So once or twice a day could still be 5 hours of my whole day of being there by myself. When I finally came home for good, my husband still had the apartment from, I guess technically the end of probably December there till July, and I wouldn't even go up there and visit. We were still trying to work on things in a way, but if we seen each other, he would have to make the trip to Russell County. There were no, well, I'll go to the apartment for this week or that week. It wasn't a fair trade on that. And he didn't realize what had happened at the apartment. I don't know that anything ever bothered him there either, but he was kind of sided as far as the professionals were on me needing therapy and me just being batshit crazy. So I don't know to this day, because there's days that I can feel the energy, but it's not like it ever turns into anything the way that it did then.
We want to deeply thank Lucy for her story and use her story as a gentle reminder that oftentimes in telling these stories, it's an emotional experience. It's an emotionally trying experience to go through these types of things. And to retell them to people is as emotionally as, it tries the emotions just like living the experience sometimes. So we want to take this moment just to deeply thank everybody who shared their experiences with us. We know how hard that is. And we're honored and grateful that you chose us to talk about these things with. So what did you think about that story? Give us your breakdown of those events.
The story is fascinating. And it, and it seems like this energy attached itself to Lucy somehow through maybe some object or something, some type of energy in her life. And the interesting thing is that it followed her.
Right.
It kind of an interesting note about the house she described at the first of telling the story.
Yeah.
Is the hole in the basement wall.
That hole tripped me out, man.
It tripped me out too, but I remember when I was a kid in my grandparents' home, they had a similar hole in their basement. Like you would go down the steps, and the way she described it, I actually seen that in my head. I kind of was like I kind of could understand what she was talking about, because I don't know if older homes back in the day that was something they had.
Right.
But it's almost like a tunnel type thing. It was
But
almost,
what a synchronicity that you had a similar experience when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it always freaked me out, just like what she would say.
Right.
It was kind of scary. But the story she told about this entity, kind of at first speaking to her and then manifesting, itself into this being that was carrying this black book, which she believed to be a Bible, is just mind blowing.
Very, very much.
So what did you think?
Like I said, Lucy, while I was getting this interview, Lucy became emotional several times, and we had to stop the recording. It's a prominent theory with shadow people that they feed off of that fear and that hatred and that all those negative emotions swirling around when they're sighted. And in this particular instance, because I've known Lucy for quite a while, and she's told me this story a few times over the years, but she always left out that hat. She always left out that hat. And when I was talking to her the other day, just to get kind of an idea for this episode, she mentioned that hat. And I was like, that almost stopped my heart. Because anybody who studies these type of things, and especially the shadow people, have heard of this one particular entity that many, many, many people have saw, over and over, known as the Hat Man. And he's a particular shadow entity with a long coat or shirt, like she mentioned, and a hat. And this entity has been seen with the types of entities that perform abductions, like the Greys, and it's been seen with what we traditionally think of as ghosts, the spirits of the dead. So when she mentioned that hat, it took the breath out of me for a second. And if you notice when she's telling her story, when she gets to the hat, that's almost the most emotional she becomes. It's like that hat, something, and I don't know what it is about the hat, but it's something about that hat that just, sets it off. Going back to the hole, though, I find that hole very, very interesting. And I find it interesting that the entire time that they stayed at this whole house, they didn't go down there.
Right.
They left the lights off, left the door closed, never went down there. But when they looked at this hole, it was almost like a black hole in their wall. I mean, it was a void for lack of a better term. And when she told this to me, my immediate thoughts were, and I have no, evidence of this, but my immediate thoughts were something came out of that hole and attached itself.
Yeah.
And also I find it interesting that both the times that these entities really presented themselves to her were right after childbirth. Because the shadow people and the Hat Man in particular seem to have an affinity for children. They like being around children. And I don't know if that's all the emotions that kids have. I don't know if that's, but that's definitely a reoccurring theme with these type of sightings.
Yeah.
And just like Tony's call before hers, we have the disembodied voices. We have the ramping up of activity. We have, and to compare it to a well-known case, the Bell Witch. This is very similar to the Bell Witch. Which is odd because we're using the pen name Lucy, and in the Bell Witch, that was one of the aliases of the witch. Not planned, another tiny synchronicity. But this is the way that the Bell Witch started. It started out with these tiny disembodied voices, and then grew into these sightings of entities and these sightings of, odd creatures and all this. I find it very interesting that she mentions that the house is so cold in the middle of July that she has to use a heater for heat.
That's one thing that got my attention. Is that's what a lot of people, when they talk about paranormal experiences, it does get cold.
Right. And I thought that was very interesting. And then we go back to this entity initially while they were living at the apartment saying, hey. Let's take that back to Tony's encounter.
Right.
I mean, comfortably numb goes over the speaker, and it's hello.
Right.
And then you're right back to that threes. You're right back to those three taps. You're right back to those three explosions. It's something with threes. It's something with, I don't know, but there's something with that.
Yeah, there's some type of pattern or method of communication that they use in threes.
Very much so. It's always threes, which is interesting. The Trinity in Christianity. Threes are just very prominent in
right.
the cult and in different spiritual traditions. And but then she starts talking about this new apartment they moved into, and she says that there was drug dealing going on of hard drugs. She says there are a lot of people there that are afraid and full of, different types of emotions because of the state of their whatever, just life in general. And it's interesting that, a lot of heroin users, a lot of methamphetamine users also report a lot of shadow person activity. They see a lot of shadow people.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a common thing with hardcore drug users. They see these shadow people, and it almost makes you wonder if these shadow people weren't hanging around there because there was so much of that. You know, that there was so much of that fear and anger and hatred and worry and things like that.
Attaching themselves to the bad energy.
Exactly. And this Hat Man, I mean, you know, there's all of this negative energy in this one place, and this Hat Man manifested because of this, to feed off of this. I find it interesting that she says that the energy invaded the house. Like, it totally pervaded every aspect of the house until it was so much that he appeared.
Yeah, it just encompassed the house, and it just kind of put this negative energy and filled it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it just filled this house with it until there he was. Until it was so much, until the tension was so pervading that it's almost like he could not be there.
Right.
It's like, I imagine like a fog of smoke drifting out until boom. I find it very interesting that he had this Bible, the Shadow Bible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we hear, what's that old quote about, the devil knows the Bible better than anyone?
Yeah.
You know, that's interesting. I find it interesting that she mentions that she felt like her kids were a form of protection away from this thing. And I told her when she was telling me that part, I said, you know, that's that motherly instinct. Because, and this is, I really wanted to hit on this before we go out, because, you know, just listening to Lucy's encounter was an emotionally traumatizing thing. I mean, you know, I told her how good of a story this is for researchers like us, how thorough and full of a story this is. And she said, to me, it's a monster that stole my life for a year. And I said, you know, I don't necessarily understand that because I've never had this level of an encounter, but I've heard that from many people over different phenomena, from the abductions to, you know, the shadow people to many different things. And, you know, like John Kill says, we are experts in nothing. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know what these things are. We don't know why they're doing what they're doing. We don't know, you know, what they want. But it seems like when you encounter these things, if you get angry at them, if you tell them to leave, if you invoke a deity that you believe in. For instance, if you're Christian, if you invoke the name of Jesus and tell them in the name of Jesus, leave my house, they leave. Mm-hmm. If you're Islamic and you invoke Allah, you say in the name of Allah, leave my house, these things leave. It's something about faith. It's something about anger. It's something about that human emotion. When you turn it on and you focus it toward them, they can't stand that.
Right.
And it almost makes me wonder if it's because they are not of this realm, that this is our realm, this is the physical realm, and when we command them to do something, they have to do it because this is ours. But they don't want us to know that because they need our emotions to feed off of. But I just wanted to make mention of that. You know, if anybody out there is dealing with these things, try that. Try getting angry at them. Try yelling at them. Try telling them to leave. You know, I made the joke when we were recording. I was like, what would have happened if you were just nice to the thing? Like, if you were just very, not inviting by any means, but like, you know, when she saw it standing over the baby's crib, if she was just like, oh, I didn't see you there. How are you today? You know what I mean? Like, just very polite to it. I wonder if that would just totally mess it up, and if it would be like, I don't know what to do. And just
make it shut down.
Yeah. I've never encountered a shadow person, and I know this might sound weird, but when I get that anxiety, because I do sometimes, I feel like I'm being watched. I feel like there's something in the room with me. I put on hip hop. I put on Kanye West. I put on J. Cole. I put on Jay-Z. And I don't know why it makes me feel better, but I've thought about it over the years, and I wonder if it's not just the braggadocious nature of rap and of hip hop, and if it's not just, you know, hip hop is a very human music. Yes. It's very much about, I'm a human being, I'm making it on my own.
Yeah.
And I don't think they like that. I don't think they like good human emotions. I don't think they like happiness. I don't think they like focused anger in their direction. I don't think they like us to be proud of ourselves, or not proud, confident in ourselves. I think they want us beaten down. I think they want us at a level where they can feed off of us. And again, we are experts in nothing. We don't know what these things want. But there are many cases where, calling on the name of Jesus, calling on the name of God, getting angry at them, they leave. They can't stand it for whatever reason. So, I just wanted to mention that before we go out. If anybody is dealing with these types of entities, try that. Try, if it's as bad as Lucy's experience has gotten, why not try it?
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess with Lucy's experience, as you saying, Commander, I think these entities, they attach themselves to negative energy. And as you were saying, they have to play by our rules when they're in our world.
Right.
But if you turn the tables on them and you turn the negative energy into positive energy, they seem to go away.
Right.
There are documented cases where sometimes they're more persistent to not go away.
Very much so.
But in general, it does seem to work. Invoking, a deity's name, such as Jesus, Allah,
whichever deity you subscribe.
Whichever one.
It's more faith than anything.
It's more the faith and the positive
right.
thought of this is going to work, which is faith itself.
And sage, burn some sage. Burn sage in conjunction with these things. If that's your deal, cleanse your house. It seems like that works in a lot of cases, that cleansing.
And if I'm not mistaken, we're getting ready to go into Mercury being in retrograde.
On Halloween night, Mercury's going into retrograde.
It's going to last until, November 10th?
Yeah. Mercury must be in retrograde again.
Exactly. That was good.
That's going to do it for us tonight. On this All Hallows Eve, we wish everybody going out to trick-or-treat a safe and fun, happy time. Keep your eyes on the skies. Keep your eyes peeled for Sasquatch, tall gray entities, the Hat Man. For Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Till the next moon rises, night owls. Good night and happy Halloween.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.